Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's live broadcast, Preserving Data Integrity, 21 CFR Part 11, Compliance and Osmolality as a Process Parameter. Presented by Angela Bazigos, CEO of Touchstone Technologies, Incorporated. Also joining Ms. Bazigos are Dr. Kristeena Wright and Shweta Nair of Advanced Instruments. I'm Christy Jewell of LabRoots, and I'll be your moderator for today's event. Today's educational web seminar is brought to you by LabRoots and sponsored by Advanced Instruments. Advanced Instruments has been the market leader for osmolality solutions since 1955. They are focused on serving the biopharmaceutical industry by delivering innovative solutions that meet customer needs across the value chain. For more information on our sponsor, please visit aicompanies.com. Now let's get started. I would like to remind everyone that today's event is interactive, and we encourage you to participate in several ways. You can submit as many questions as you want at any time you want during the presentation. To do so, simply type them into the Ask a Question box and click Send. We will answer as many questions as we have time for at the end of the presentation. Additionally, we want to hear from you, and we will be conducting a few polls throughout the presentation, and we appreciate your participation. If you have any trouble seeing or hearing the presentation, click on the Support tab found at the top right of the presentation window, or use that Ask a Question box to let us know you're experiencing a problem. This presentation is educational and thus offers continuing education credits. Please click on the Continuing Education Credits tab located at the top right of the presentation window and follow the process to obtain your credits. I'd now like to introduce our first presenter, Angela Bazigos. Angela Bazigos is the CEO of Touchstone Technologies, Incorporated. Her employers and clients range from Roche to Stanford Hospital. Ms. Bazigos is co-author of the original 24 CFR Part 11. She holds a patent on virtual validation, has co-authored a book on computerized systems and clinical research with the FDA, and assists the FDA with new guidance on data integrity. For a complete biography on Ms. Bazigos, please visit the Biography tab at the top of your screen. Ms. Bazigos, you may now begin your presentation.
Well, thank you, Christy, for that introduction, and good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on your time zone. My name is Angela Bazigos. As Christy said, I am one of the original authors of 21 CFR 11, and today I am going to be speaking on data integrity and 21 CFR 11 and explain how those two work together and why FDA is very, very keen on them. And then I'll pass the presentation back to Christy, and she will introduce the Advanced Instruments folk who will talk about how to achieve compliance with advanced instruments. So let's start off with what is data integrity. Well, very, very simply, the data that you start with is the data that you end up with. So at the origin and the destination, the data is identical. To do that, we have various methods, but before I start on those, and those are the 21 CFR 11 methods, I'm going to read to you the official definition for data integrity, and that is, data integrity is defined as the extent to which all data, whether electronic or paper-based, are complete, consistent, accurate, trustworthy, and reliable throughout the data life cycle, from creation through archival status and their eventual destruction. So regulatory agencies, life sciences industries, we need to have the data to be accurate to ensure that the subject and patient rights and safety and the scientific value of clinical studies are valid and can be trusted. The other way to think about data integrity is the attributable, legible, contemporaneous, original, and accurate ALCOA way of doing data, and 21 CFR 11 is the way that we ensure that alcohol is achieved with the data. So that brings us to 21 CFR 11. I am a 21 CFR 11 evangelist. I feel exactly like this Harold person here. I have passion for 21 CFR 11. And at this point, I'd like to do a survey of how many of you absolutely love 21 CFR 11. And we'll wait a couple of seconds to get the responses. And yeah, I love 21 CFR 11, said no one ever. I will do a survey at the end of the presentation as well to see if I could change your mind about 21 CFR 11, because it is my thesis that is very easy to understand and very useful to use to ensure data integrity. So to begin with, I'm going to give you a little bit of a history of 21 CFR 11, so that will explain to you what the rule looks like today and why it looks like the way it looks. So I want to take you back to the beginnings of time, at least in computer life, around 1983. And in 1983, there was an FDA investigator who found a computer in a company he had gone to investigate. Unfortunately, he had noticed this was not the first company that was using computers. And in 1983, he wrote a very thoughtful paper that's still on the FDA website, explaining what computers were. They used punch cards, they had dotsed matrix printers, and explained all the pieces and what they were doing. And he said, and this is not the last paragraph in the paper, it's the a couple of paragraphs before the last paragraph. He said, computers are being used in increasing numbers in the pharma industry. It is possible that in the future, many companies, including smaller ones, will be using computers. Wow. That was 1983. Now, of course, we use computers for everything, and we have GAMP5 to tell us how to validate computers. But starting in 1983, FDA got a little worried about these computer things and started adding verbiage in the predicate rules. And when I say predicate rules, I mean things like Part 58, Part 211, Part 312, Part 820. Those are all predicate rules, and they had verbiage that was added to them to deal with computer systems. And just keep that in mind, and I'll cycle back to it later. So here's 21 CFR 11, the rule. There's three subparts. Subpart A is general provisions, B is electronic records, and C is electronic signatures. I will not go over general provisions since it's the scope and definitions, and that yes, it needs to be implemented. But let's look into more detail in electronic records and electronic signatures. And in order to make it obvious what we were trying to do at the time, I am going to use three examples. One will be your bank statements, online bank statements. The second one will be a coffee machine, and the third one will be your Bluetooth device. So let's start off, before I even go into that, which systems need to be compliant, which records need to be compliant. I think of these as buckets, and I have three buckets here. One is systems that control GXP data. What are GXP data? Anything that's clinical, laboratory, or manufacturing data. And the second one is systems that are used to make quality decisions. What I mean by that is things like documented evidence of SOPs, your tracking list, like your suppliers, your audits, and of course any quality assurance data that you might have. And then there's a third bucket, and the third bucket is sort of a little bit of a catch-all, but it basically says if the computer system contains data that somehow, somewhere, will find its way into a submission to an agency, then it needs to be Part 11 compliant. Of course, the good news is today we actually have a risk-based approach to cut back on the amount of work that needs to be done to ensure that the data is compliant. So electronic records, like I said, is subpart B, and I am going to start by defining, by orienting you to 21 CFR 11 a little bit. So as you're probably aware, 21 CFR is volume 21 of the Code of Federal Regulations, which applies to the Food, Drug, and Cosmetics Act of 1906. So it's just a book, as it were. The book has chapters, and chapters are things like 1158 to 11. The predicate rules are chapters, and so is Part 11. And then the chapters have paragraphs, subparagraphs, etc. So let's start with 1110. And by the way, if you have 2 digits after the 11 dot, then it's electronic records. If you have 3 digits, it's electronic signatures. So we'll start with 1110. And 1110A is validation, B, accurate and complete copies of records, C, protection of records, D, limited system access, E, audit trails, F, operational system checks, G, authority checks, H, device checks, I, training, J, written policies for electronic signatures, and K, control over systems documentation. And in the next few slides, I will go over each part in a little more detail. I will use my FDA to English dictionary to translate this into English. However, I want to point out that 1110 is about closed systems. Now, you might see the FDA ease here, or the legalese here, that basically says a closed system is a system that is inside your firewall. That's basically what that says. And after closed systems, we have open systems. Open systems, conversely, are systems that are outside your firewall. So if you're inside the firewall, you go with 1110. If you're outside the firewall, you also need digital signatures for open systems. And what I'll do when I go through more detail, I will explain digital signatures. Then we have 1150, requirements for signed electronic records. 1170, linking records to signatures. And if you're sitting there thinking, but, you told us electronic signatures have 3 digits. Yeah, guys, this is the government, okay? Bear with me. So then we hop over to the electronic signatures proper, 11100, general requirements for electronic signatures, 200 electronic signature components and controls, and 300 controls for identification codes and passwords. So let me unpack these a little bit more. So I am going to start with 21 CFR 1110A, also known as Computer Systems Validation. Now, this is not anything new. All this covers all the previously added verbiage that FDA put in the predicate rules to cover computer systems. However, I have a mission for you here. There's more to this, and I will read it out and then tell you a true story. So 1110A says procedures should be in place for validation of systems to ensure accuracy, reliability, consistent intended performance, and the ability to discern invalid or altered records. Data integrity much, and the story I want to tell you, and this is a true story, we are familiar with terms like Six Sigma today, quality by design. However, back in the 80s, when these things started, we had a concept called total quality management that was instigated by a chap called Deming. Professor Deming actually took this to Japan because it was rejected in the US, and this is the reason that Japan today has such great reputation for quality. However, what happened at the time, after he had implemented this in Japan, an American company ordered 10,000 widgets from a Japanese company. 10,000 widgets. I cannot remember what the widgets were. And I do not know if you know this, but if you order in bulk, we usually have an acceptance threshold. So, for example, if you order 10,000 glass test tubes, you usually say, hey, we get it, you know, the test tubes are in the warehouse, they have to be thrown into the loading pallets, then thrown into the dock, thrown into the truck, thrown into the train, thrown into another truck, and then thrown into a receiving dock. Somehow, somewhere, maybe up to 6 glass test tubes will break in there. So we have an acceptance threshold that says, okay, well, if 6 out of the 10,000 glass test tubes are faulty, we will accept the shipment and pay for it. So the American company orders 10,000 widgets from the Japanese company, and they add the clause of if 6 out of 10,000 are faulty, we will accept the shipment and pay for it. A few weeks later, they get a big box and a little box. And they open the big box, and in there are 9,994 perfectly good widgets, which is a little puzzling. What's the little box? So they open the little box, and inside there are 6 faulty widgets with a letter that says, we do not understand why you wanted faulty widgets. However, here they are wrapped separately. We hope you enjoyed our service and will order from us again. And what this was doing is it ensured accuracy, reliability, consistent intended performance in all the good widgets, and the ability to discern invalid or altered widgets, and they were wrapped separately. So this is all you have to achieve when you're doing computer systems validation. No pressure. But let's take the rest of 21 CFR 11. And I will be going through these quite rapidly, but we'll start with accurate records generation, 21 CFR 1110B. This is where if you print your bank statements from online, you're able to see an accurate representation of what the bank computer has online. 1110C, protection of records. You protect your records. If the IRS wants to see your records 3 years later, you can still retrieve them, whether you're archiving them, you're backing them up, and of course, you know how to do it. This is protection of records. 1110D, limited system access, procedures to make sure that your neighbor or your teenage offspring does not get into your bank account. So you limit the access to only yourself and your spouse. 1110E, audit trails. People get very worried about audit trails because they say that you want secure computer generated time-stamped audit trails that Do not obscure previously recorded information. This is just a bank statement. If you think about it, your bank statement has secure computer-generated time-stamped records. So if you deposit $100 at 10 a.m. and then you withdraw $80 at 10:10, you have both transactions described in your bank statement, and the 80 withdrawal does not obscure the 100 deposit. FG and H are procedural, so 1110F is operational system checks, also known as workflow. And what this says, if you want to make coffee with a coffee machine, you want to add water and coffee and then press the brew button. If you add water but no coffee, you'll get hot water. Great for tea, but not coffee. If you add coffee but no water and then press the brew button, you will get smoke coming out of the machine. So 1110F says if there are steps that need to be taking place and the sequence they need to take place needs to be enforced through the system. This is called workflow. Authority checks 1110G. If you go to your bank and write a check to cash for $100, the cashier will check your ID and then will simply give you the cash. However, if you were to go to the same bank, same cashier, write a check for $10,000, see what happens. Well, the cashier will check your ID, but then call over a person that has the authority to release $10,000. In your company, this is implemented by having the manager approve something, and say the data entry person can enter data but cannot approve data. And then device checks. This is like your Bluetooth. Instead of your Bluetooth picking up everybody's conversation, you can only pick up conversation from your phone. So this is linking. This is the handshake between two devices, usually used for instruments. Now, if you're wondering how the heck we wrote the first version of 21 CFR 11 in 1992, and if you are wondering how the heck we knew about Bluetooth devices in 92, well, we didn't. We actually used garage door openers as our example. The next one is the 1110I training. This is not specific to 21 CFR 11. It applies to everything, so I will not go through this. 1110J. This is something, again, it's 2 digits, but it's electronic signatures. And it basically says that all employees, if you're going to be using electronic signatures in your company, your employees have to sign a statement that I understand that electronic signatures are legally binding and have the same meaning as handwritten signatures. So I always recommend using pizza and beer for this activity. Have a big party, and of course you can use comfort food and comfort beverage of your choice. But have a big party, get everybody in, and then get them to sign, and make sure you check their ID, and also make sure that the name they're signing is not the anglicized one, but the actual name on their ID. Documentation, of course, is the same as everything else. And then we come out of closed systems and pop over to 1130, which is digital signatures for open systems. So now we're outside the firewall, and you have seen digital signatures. When you first log into your bank account, you will get a message that says, hey, we do not know this computer. Who are you? We will send you a code. So you take the code, you put that in your computer, and then the bank computer can use your computer's IP address as your code. Or you can use VPN, or you can use one of those cards that generate a new number every 7 seconds. Those are all forms of digital signatures. Electronic signature manifestations is the rule. I'll show you the next slide. Basically, they should look like Angela Bazigos, 05th September 2008, and the timestamp and the reason for the signatures. So the difference between digital signatures and electronic signatures is digital signatures are just a code. In VPN, it would be an extra password. The electronic signature actually has to tell you who it is, when it happened, and you want it in universal date format, and why you are applying this signature. Linking records to signatures, this is saying that if you have a signature in the system, you cannot do like you can do today. Today you can go on the internet and copy Barack Obama's signature or Donald Trump's signature and put in as many checks as you want. What linking records to signatures says is do not allow people to excise and paste an electronic signature. And speaking about electronic signatures, this is what an electronic signature looks like for us. You can see Lisa Jones, digitally signed, blah, blah, blah. Well, if you go to somewhere like a supermarket or another shop, you would be signing with a stylus. They're the same thing. So electronic signatures, they will be unique, but you have to ensure that you send something to FDA to let them know that you will be using electronic signatures. And then remember that signature log that came out of the pizza and beer party? Well, that needs to be kept in case the FDA inspects you, because they will want to see that signature log. However, I have the address on this slide if you to send the certification. Like I said, keep hold of the signature log. Components and controls of electronic signatures, you have to have at least 2 parts, and we know it's usually username and password. And then controls for identification codes and passwords. I would say all of this needs to be in your security SOP, and it's very straightforward. Think of a credit card or a debit card. If you were to lose your credit card or debit card, you would get a replacement, you would cancel the other one, you would let people know, etc., etc. So I have some references here for you if you want to read more about these, and I included Annex 11, which is the European version. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take some slides from one of my FDA contacts and explain the marriage between 21 CFR 11 and data integrity. So I want to thank all these people for putting these slides together. And FDA starts by saying that garbage in, garbage out. You want to make sure you have clean data. So remember I said earlier in the presentation that what FDA did is initially it added the verbiage for a computer control inside the predicate rules. So I'm just going to show you one of these slides, and I have a few other slides that you can use for reference. But it's not a new concept. It's been around since the 80s, as I mentioned earlier. But notice, for example, here, 211 Part 68, 211 Part 68 requires that backup data are exact and complete and secure from alteration, inadvertent erasures, or loss. Hey, does that sound familiar? It's 1110C that says records must be protected to enable their accurate and ready retrieval throughout the record's retention period. Or another example, we have ICH-Q7 says GMP-related computerized systems should be validated. We know the ones that are GMP-related. It was those three buckets. And we have 1110A. Procedures should be in place for validation of systems to ensure accuracy, reliability, consistent intended performance, and the ability to discern invalid or altered records. Another one we have that says implement documentation controls to attribute actions to a specific individual, which says do not share your login credentials. 21 CFR 1110D, procedures should be in place to limit system access to authorized users. The next one, same. And by the way, at the bottom of these FDA slides, there's the warning letter that you can look to get more detail. And then we have this one that says, when does electronic data become a cGMP record? And basically, the minute you generate data to satisfy a cGMP requirement, all data becomes a cGMP record. And remember the alcohol earlier slide that we said it needs to be original, so it is not acceptable to record data on pieces of paper that will be discarded after the data are transcribed. While you do not see this in 21 CFR 11 specifically, you would find it in Annex 11. And in 21 CFR 11, it is with data integrity and good documentation practices. Audit trails, FDA recommends audit trails capture changes there, and they're reviewed because 1110E, audit trails, if you look at the bottom part of audit trail, it says that audit trails are electronic records too. So with that, I have reached the end of my presentation. I'd like to pass you back to Kristi, who will also run a poll on how much more you love 21 CFR 11 now that you see how simple and scalable it is. Kristi, back to you.
Thank you, Ms. Bazigos. That was an excellent presentation and a lot of information to take in. So to our audience, I would like to take your pulse now that you are a little bit more informed. So here comes our second poll. Okay, kicking off the second part of our presentation, we have Dr. Kristeena Wright and Ms. Shweta Nair. Dr. Kristeena Wright is an application scientist at Advanced Instruments and holds a PhD in biomedical science with a background in academia and biopharmaceutical development. Dr. Wright has a deep understanding of the value of osmolality testing throughout bioprocessing. Ms. Shweta Nair is a senior production manager at Advanced Instruments focused on the biotech industry. She has a background in research and product management, driving successful innovative solutions to answer customer needs in the life science market. Dr. Wright and Ms. Nair, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Kristi, and thank you again, Angela, for your wonderful presentation. As Kristi mentioned, we will now speak a little bit more about Advanced Instruments, about our technology, and some of what we have to offer even beyond the instruments themselves. So we are dedicated to providing valuable tools that help with bioprocessing control. So just to get into the value of osmolality testing a little bit before we actually get into the instrumentation, the definition of osmolality is really a concentration of any aqueous solution. It's typically expressed as milliosmoles per kilogram of water. And you'll notice that the Advanced Instruments osmometers take advantage of freezing point depression. There are other properties of solutions that can be measured and converted into osmolality, such as vapor pressure or osmotic pressure if you're looking at a membrane osmometer. However, freezing point depression remains the most accurate and precise method for measuring osmolality, and that is the technique that we use here at Advanced Instruments with all of our osmometers. So the question is, where is osmolality tested? So you'll see here a few examples just within upstream processing for monoclonal antibodies. And I say that because obviously this also extends into other areas of biopharmaceuticals, but we wanted to focus in on this one process in particular. So if you're looking at upstream processing, osmolality testing can really be valuable from the very beginning, from cell line development and establishing which clones, which cell lines, which growth factors, and what environment is suitable for your needs. To really make sure that your process is under control from the very start. So cell line development contributing to optimal cell density as well as titer. With media preparation, osmolality testing is a great way to make sure that the media, whether it's outsourced or made in-house, is of the right composition. And that's, again, to just ensure that you have optimal cell growth throughout your culturing process. And for the monitoring itself, why not use osmolality as an in-process control during your monitoring process? This is a great way to just check on the health of the cells and also make sure that you're promoting maximum cell density and yield. As we look further into the purification process or filtration steps for monoclonal antibodies, we can start again with buffer preparation. And I like to think of this as being similar to the media preparation, just using osmolality as a control, as a check, a sanity check, if you will, to make sure that your buffers have been mixed properly, that the overall concentration of your solution is right where it's supposed to be. And that's really a great way to start off the process and make sure that you can optimize, again, the quality and yield of your eventual product. Then as we look at your unit operations for chromatography and for your filtration steps for buffer exchange and concentration, we really are focusing again on the highest quality, the highest yield of your products. So for chromatography, it's very possible to use osmolality testing in process as far as being used as a predictor, really, for protein concentration. We have a really great study that we've just completed, and we'd be happy to share information to show that osmolality is a really great indicator for protein concentration throughout chromatography steps. As far as buffer exchange, it can be used similarly in process as you're looking at the number of dia volumes that you're using for your exchanges through your filtration processes. It's a really great idea to use osmolality to make sure that your exchanges are complete. You could potentially optimize the number of exchanges that you're using and make sure that you have thorough exchange throughout the process. And last but not least, when we're looking at monoclonal antibody formulation and final product, we have formulation development, which similarly to the cell line development process, you have a lot of different situations, experimental conditions that you want to test at a time. This is a great time to use a more high throughput tool. And Shweta will be discussing some of the options as far as our instruments a little bit later in our presentation. But just to introduce the idea of multi-sample testing, this would be a great application for that. Final formulation, monitoring and verifying the concentration of your excipients. And osmolality testing can also be used to look at the soluble content of any formulation. And we know that the osmolality contributes to any potential injection site pain. So again, just measuring osmolality here is a really great check at final formulation. And then when we talk about release specifications, osmolality is fairly standard in this area, but it's always good to point out that this is another area where osmolality testing brings value, and additionally, it could serve as another check for product stability. So at this point, I will hand over our presentation to Shweta Nair, and she will discuss some of our technology and a lot of the other services that we have to offer.
Thanks, Kristeena. Now, as you've all seen, osmolality is a very valuable process parameter across the workflow. And we here at Advanced Instruments are really dedicated to providing products such as an osmometer and associated services to optimize your bioprocessing workflow. For over 60 years, we at Advanced Instruments have built an in-depth understanding of freezing point depression technology and provided solutions for osmolality testing across clinical and biotech industry. But over the last 2 years, we've really focused on developing our products to specifically meet the changing needs of the biopharma market. Part of meeting the needs is understanding the many facets of biomanufacturing, such as QC, final product, fill finish. Now, in addition to making the products cater to our customers, we also provide trusted high level of service and support. We've developed a thorough portfolio of support options for our customers, from installation and training to IQ/OQ validation packages. We also offer service packages that include preventive maintenance and 24/7 support. Therefore, Advanced Instruments with the product and services truly have you covered for your osmolality testing needs. But we are here truly to find out how our instruments can meet and support the 21 CFR Part 11 needs that Angela highlighted. Our OsmoTECH portfolio offers a robust range of osmometers for low and high throughput workflows. Our OsmoTECH is a single sample osmometer developed specifically for our biotech customers with low testing needs. And its multi-sample counterpart is the OsmoTECH Pro that was launched recently. These instruments provide the obvious osmolality testing with high accuracy and precision, intuitive design, but it also incorporates many features that are important to our biotech customers, such as audit trail, electronic data management, electronic signatures, features that ensure that these instruments can support the 21 CFR Part 11 compliance. Now, I'll focus on the different aspects of the 21 CFR Part 11 compliance and how our OsmoTECH portfolio meets those needs. First is complete accurate record. All data generated by our OsmoTECH and OsmoTECH Pro can be stored electronically either on the device with unlimited storage, directly onto the network automatically, on a USB key, or even integrated into the lab systems as required. The data generated cannot be altered. We do have the ability, however, to add comments to the results and add reasons for any changes being made to give you that full traceability. Now, electronic data generated can be of two formats, giving you flexibility, a PDF or a CSV format. And above all, these instruments can be validated or qualified using our comprehensive IQ/OQ package to always ensure that the system is performing according to manufacturer requirements. Next is audit trail. Our OsmoTECH, OsmoTECH Pro microosmometers record any and all changes as part of audit trail. This includes creation of users, changes in settings, etc. The records are all time-stamped, identified by the user who made the changes. These records cannot be modified or deleted. Additionally, it can be configured, though, to require a reason for the changes, so you have that traceability. This gives you a true and complete audit trail that you're looking for. Access controls. Now, I mentioned users earlier, and I want to go a little bit more in depth, talking about the different types of user access. You have the ability to have 3 levels of user access: administrator, supervisor, and operator. All of these accounts are password protected, and the passwords can be configured to require a minimum number of characters. There's also a lot of flexibility here to customize and configure the password. For instance, you can use capitals, lowercase, numbers. You can even have a pre-expire password or have a password expire after a certain period of time, forcing the user to change their password. These 3 levels of users also have the ability to customize what functions each of them can do. So you can log in and require that an operator cannot calibrate the instrument, but a supervisor can do so, and that can be customized on the instrument. Last but not the least, I want to talk about electronic signature. To truly get electronic signature, you also have the ability to connect the device to an Active Directory server. This really gives you the ability to easily manage the different users in your lab and the different access levels. Your IT team can quickly allocate a certain number of users to be an administrator, a supervisor, or an operator, and integrate that with our instrument. Therefore, you can see now that with complete accurate record, electronic data management, user access levels, and electronic record, and OsmoTECH and OsmoTECH Pro microosmometer is really supporting and meeting the 21 CFR Part 11 compliance and helping you preserve that data integrity in your biopharmaceutical workflow. Now, I'd like to thank you all for listening and hand it over back to Kristi for our live Q&A session.
Thank you, Dr. Wright and Ms. Nair, for your presentation, and welcome back, Ms. Bazigos. We will now start the live Q&A portion of our webinar. If you have a question you would like to ask, please do so now. Just click on that Ask a Question box located on the far left of your screen, and we will answer as many questions as we have time for. We have some great questions coming in. Let's start with, why is osmolality needed if I am testing pH and conductivity?
Great, thank you for the question. I'll try to answer this as briefly as possible. So kind of referring to the downstream process, and when we were discussing the value of osmolality testing, really, it's not to replace pH and conductivity. Obviously, those are pretty key parameters for this area. However, we have a number of studies that have shown that osmolality actually provides additional value. It can serve as an orthogonal or complementary parameter, if you will, to pH and conductivity, and is a really good way to check buffer concentrations if you're in the preparation area that we discussed. And it can also serve as a predictor of sorts for protein concentration in more of an inline or in-process, rather, parameter for chromatography.
Thank you. On to our next question. And Ms. Bazigos, I believe this one's for you. What is the difference between 21 CFR 11 and Annex 11?
Thank you. Age is the difference between Part 11 and Annex 11. So Annex 11 is a much newer regulation that is a European regulation, but it has huge overlap with 21 CFR 11. Also, Annex 11 has a little bit of a slant towards manufacturing, but both Part 11 and Annex 11 have covered the entire GXP area. Also, I believe that you can send questions after we finish here, and if you like, I can send you a report on the similarities and differences. But short answer is they're about 85% the same, just different verbiage and different age.
Thank you, Ms. Bazigos. Now, I have a question coming in. I'm in formulation, and I'm not concerned with 21 CFR Part 11 compliance. Do you have any other options?
So great question. Really, all of our options are based into one instrument or the other. So we discussed the OsmoTECH single sample osmometer and the OsmoTECH Pro for multi-sample, more high throughput needs. The great thing about them is that they are pretty flexible, and Shweta spoke to this a little bit, but just to highlight the fact that even if you don't currently feel like you need to meet the regulations that were discussed in this presentation, it's something that could potentially change over time. And these systems are really great tools that can kind of follow you as you grow. So if there are pieces that are interesting to you, or you feel like you just want to incorporate them into your procedures and your methods, you can enable those features on the device. If you're not interested in certain features, certainly you can disable as many of those as you'd like, but we want to give you the opportunity to really have all of these features at your fingertips, and that's what we offer with both instruments.
Thank you, Dr. Wright. Now, while we're on discussing compliance, does the osmometer comply with 21 CFR Part 11?
Thank you for that question. The OsmoTECH and the OsmoTECH Pro microosmometers support 21 CFR Part 11 requirements and regulations.
Okay, and our next question, do you need a computer to be connected to the osmometer to access the data?
That is a very interesting question. You actually don't need a computer to be connected to the device to be accessing the data. You can access the data by simply touching the touchscreen display as the data is all stored within the device. Additionally, you have the ability to send that data to a folder in your network in the form of a PDF or a CSV, and you can access it that way. We've also built in an embedded web server on the device. What that means is if you are in another building, you can remotely access the data that's on this device by simply typing in the IP address in your web browser. So you have different flexible ways of accessing the data and without having any computer directly connected to it or solely dedicated to it.
Thank you, Ms. Nair. Now, Ms. Bazigos, let's come over to you. So is computer systems validation the same as 21 CFR 11?
All right, so this is a little confusing. Computer systems validation is basically all the verbiage that was in the predicate rules has now been moved over to computer systems validation. So as part of Part 11, you have computer systems validation. But the way to implement Part 11 is to make it part of computer systems validation. So it's sort of, they're one inside the other. However, they're not the same thing. They break down to two different guidance documents. And of course, there's GAMP 5, which is computer systems validation, and not the rest of Part 11. And it's confusing, I know. I hope my answer made sense.
Thank you, Ms. Bazigos. Now, we have some great questions coming in. We're almost out of time, so I do want to remind our audience that those questions we do not have time to answer today, and those that come in during the on-demand period, they will be addressed by our speakers via the contact information you provided at the time of registration. So Ms. Bazigos, one more for you here. I have not seen citations for 21 CFR 11. Do regulatory authorities still inspect for 21 CFR 11?
Yes, they do, but they're sneaky about it. The citation is actually written against the predicate rule or against data integrity. So I recently saw a data integrity citation by an Austrian regulatory authority. But remember how I said the verbiage is inside 211, Part 58. You will actually see the citation against the predicate rule. So yes, they are Part 11 citations, but unless you know how to look for them, you would not be able to detect them. The one point I do want to make is, if anything, FDA has stepped up Part 11 inspections since they did the add-on inspections in 2012, and they found it a very productive field, shall we say. So they hired a lot more people to be doing Part 11 inspections. They're training their inspectors, so they're really stepping it up. So it's an extremely important part of inspections now.
Thank you, Ms. Bazigos. Now, before we go, I'd like to thank the audience for joining us today and for their interesting questions. We did have quite a few questions that we were unable to answer today. So I do want to reiterate that those questions we didn't answer and those questions that do come in during the on-demand period will be addressed by the speakers via the contact information you provided at the time of registration. I would once again like to thank Ms. Angela Bazigos, Dr. Kristeena Wright, and Ms. Shweta Nair for their time today and for their important contributions in data integrity. We would also like to thank LabRoots and our sponsor, Advanced Instruments, for underwriting today's educational webcast. This webcast can be viewed on demand LabRoots will alert you via email when it's available for replay. We encourage you to share that email with your colleagues who may have missed today's live event. At the close of this presentation, a survey will pop up on your screen, and your participation is greatly appreciated. Your answers help us improve our webinar program. Thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you again soon.